Today, we're going to be talking about tenant improvement allowances when leasing commercial real estate. What are they and how do they work? If you've ever started a search for commercial real estate, you likely know that your new space will require some form of build out, almost guaranteed. Whether you're searching for retail, office, or industrial property, it's important to plan for construction and the costs that are associated with retrofitting that space. Although looming construction costs can be intimidating, tenants do have the option to push for a tenant improvement allowance in order to help mitigate those costs associated with the build out. Tenant improvement allowances, also known as TI, TIA, or TA, are pre-negotiated sums of money that a landlord will provide to the tenant in order to cover all or a portion of the costs to build out the space. TI is typically expressed as a price per square foot amount. For example, if a landlord is offering $20 per square foot on a 2,500 square foot space, the landlord has agreed to reimburse the tenant for $50,000 worth of construction costs. While a tenant improvement allowance can certainly be applied to all build-out expenses, including labor, don't expect your improvement allowance to also cover the cost of furniture or other moving and startup costs that are not directly related to the physical improvements of the space. So, how do tenant improvements work? While you and your real estate broker may have negotiated a phenomenal tenant improvement allowance, keep in mind that you will more than likely still need to have the capital to cover construction costs up front. Once the work is complete and you have turned in all receipts and lien waivers proving that the work was done and paid for, your landlord will then be able to reimburse you the negotiated allowance. Returning to our previous example, if a landlord has agreed to a $50,000 improvement allowance, the tenant must still be prepared to use their own funds to initially cover that $50,000 construction budget. The landlord will then provide the tenant with the $50,000 allowance upon proof of completion, which, like I said, could include receipts, lien waivers, and more. How much TI can you negotiate? How large of a tenant improvement allowance you and your commercial broker are able to negotiate can vary depending on your business, as well as a few other key points in the lease, such as length of term, rental rate, and more. Be prepared to provide your potential landlord with financials for their review. We typically recommend that our clients include 2 to 3 years of tax returns, as well as balance sheets, profit and loss statements, and any other pieces of information that illustrate the numbers that support your business. While this process is crucial to ensure initially being approved for a space, it also gives the landlord a better idea of how much of a tenant improvement cost they're willing to cover, since they will know how financially solvent or insolvent your business is. Now, when is a good time to negotiate tenant improvements? Well, the landlord might actually offer tenant improvements right off the bat. They may already have tenant improvements built into their asking price, at which point you'll find it in their marketing materials, or they'll just tell you. Since a tenant improvement allowance is somewhat of an investment and a risk, landlords are more likely to offer allowances to businesses with stronger credit, proof of concept, and financial stability. That being said, tenant improvements are still almost always negotiable. So don't be afraid to bring up tenant allowances early on in your conversations with the landlord. Ask if they're offering them when you first speak with them over the phone or whenever you're on a tour of the space. But what if the landlord isn't offering tenant improvement allowances? If there is no initial TIA offering, don't hesitate to open that discussion with the landlord. If you are still having trouble obtaining a sufficient tenant improvement allowance, it may be time to discuss other negotiation strategies with your broker. If you are also asking for free rent or a delayed rent commencement, you may consider conceding some of this time in order to receive a larger allowance. It just completely depends on what your goals are with the space. You may also be able to negotiate more tenant improvements if you're willing to commit to a longer term lease, since the landlord will have a longer period of time to write off those expenses. Now, who completes the build out? Well, unless the landlord has agreed to turnkey the space by assuming the full responsibility of a build out, the tenant is almost always responsible for overseeing the construction. Now, a landlord may offer you TI and do the build out on their own, but it's more typical that they'll leave that up to you since they have other things to do. Of course, you will want this build out to be done through your preferred contractor if possible. If you need help finding a general contractor, either your broker or even the landlord should be able to recommend at least a handful of trustworthy options. You will also want to receive more than one bid to be sure you're receiving the quality of work you desire within a reasonable price. Even if the landlord prefers that you use a specific contractor, you do still have the opportunity to field competitive bids. Finally, be sure to keep in mind that the landlord will almost always require some form of approval for those build-out plans, so be sure to send those plans and design specs over to them for written approval prior to starting the work. If you can't negotiate for TI or the landlord doesn't want to put money into the space at all, there are alternatives to build-out allowances. While a tenant improvement allowance can certainly be helpful in making commercial space work, it may not be in every tenant's best interest or even an option moving forward. You could ask for turnkey renovations. As I briefly mentioned earlier, you may be able to ask your landlord to just turnkey the space for you. That means essentially they're going to do all the work and hand you the key so that you can move in. If your landlord agrees to such a request, they will be responsible for overseeing the construction and delivering completely completed space to you as a condition of the lease. You will have the ability to make selections and choose the design, but the landlord will finish the work. You could also go for a rent abatement or free rent period. If you are less worried about covering construction costs but more concerned with rent payments and build-out expenses overlapping, you can also focus less on the tenant improvement allowance and more on deferred rental payments. You will have a period of time where you can occupy the space without having to pay any rent, which will allow you to open up shop and start seeing customers and making money before rent commences. As with all commercial real estate negotiations, tenant improvements are best approached with a concise goal and strategy. Independent planning or discussing with your commercial broker will allow you to head into negotiations with confidence and clarity. If you're looking to better understand how commercial rents are calculated, check out this video here. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more commercial real estate investment strategies, leasing and management tips, market updates, and more, and I'll see you next time.